Today is the first of these episodes where we will share the 5 steps to better BIM management. Our agenda will be creating a BIM execution plan, agreeing on a clear BIM scope, sequencing tasks with your team, managing BIM tasks together, and verifying against your BIM requirements. Let's start with understanding the BIM execution plan, or BEP for short. Why should we create a BEP? Well, unfortunately, as many of you know, this is how projects usually work. They consist of multiple teams, usually with different views of what project success looks like. So over here we have how the customer explained it, how the BIM consultant described it, how the project was documented, what was actually installed, and finally what the customer actually wanted was just a tire swing. So BIM execution plans, or BEPs, are needed to help teams find a common agreement between multiple teams or disciplines so that everyone can follow the same standards and processes required to get the right outcome. The BIM execution plan provides governance for the project. Does every BIM project need one? Well, BEPs are starting to be commonplace. It's starting to be a common practice in many large owners' contracts and on most medium and large BIM projects. BEPs are also becoming part of more and more standard government requirements too. They're becoming mandatory. But if these BEPs are so important, why are some BIM execution plans unsuccessful? What we have found out from some companies using BIM is that their current BIM execution process takes too long to create and manage. The BEP is usually a static document, usually created by one person and mostly copied and pasted from previous projects. And no one really reads the BEP. Usually it's just one large text document. It can be 100+ pages that also references other external standards and processes that are unclear and not aligned to the project needs. Also, we have cross-company agreement from all stakeholders is extremely challenging. Multiple teams need quick access to reference or update. Processes and standards naturally evolve throughout the project, and that's okay. The cycle of gathering comments, updating, and resending the whole document seems never ending. All of this whilst the contract needs to be nailed down and fixed. We also hear that some are created as a PDF, are not read, get filed away. Yes, in the bottom drawer they're gathering dust. Only reviewed if there is a problem that needs to be addressed. So a question that we ask is, when does the BEP get used? And the answer mostly is usually when the dirt hits the fan. How do we make sure that it doesn't end up in that drawer gathering dust? Let's talk about some tips to creating a successful BIM execution plan. We see lots of success when teams build their BEPs together using a collaborative approach. Make sure that you add all team members early so that their opinion is included. Have a central location for all of your team to access an online web-based BEP. Instead of it being one person, let's build the BEP together. Make sure to use built-in templates to standardize processes. We also see increased engagement when you have good content, not just having a plain text document that gets PDF'd and completely ignored. Using video improves visualization and saves space that documents would take up. Information within sections are easy to search and navigate. Embedding visually rich information using videos, images, iframes, flowcharts is favorable, as many people just don't want to read it if it's too long. So adding videos and pictures make a huge difference. Also, gaining multi-party agreement, having all teams agree on something, it's not easy. So have a place for contributors to comment on the various aspects of the proposed plan, like on social media. What's great is that it keeps all the information together in one place, rather than one person emailing their suggestions to another person. Here, everyone can see the comments. This all helps build collaborative working. It's a never-ending cycle when you're trying to agree on an entire document. It could be 100 pages long, so splitting it up into bite-sized sections, the commenting, the workflow, sharing them and publishing them, Being able to comment on each and every single section allows you to break it up into smaller, more manageable sections. So we can publish filling out each section as we go. So what you want is to have it always up to date and accessed online, to have built-in commenting and approval workflow, progress approval workflow by bite-sized section, collaboration and updates should and always continue throughout the project. You must be able to print and archive the contract document at each important contractual stage. So a quick recap. So quickly recapping on number 1, which was BIM execution planning and helping that to be a part of your BIM management workflow. Most of the success we see is when it's online and collaborative. Also, people really enjoy being able to comment and contribute to the structure of the BIM execution plan. They really feel part of it, which has a great effect on the quality of their work and the effort that they put in. And again, having the approval process in bite-sized form, being able to approve certain parts without approving everything, allows you to move forward on what has been agreed, which saves time and money. Okay, so we've covered the importance of a BEP, but shouldn't the scope document also be a part of a BEP? Yes, absolutely. Let's take a look at how we can agree on a clear BIM scope that you can include in your BEP. So why do we need to agree on a BIM scope? We know that most project stakeholders usually have different BIM goals. Be they the architect, the engineers, or trade manager, everyone has their own idea on what their BIM would include. But why is agreement between these stakeholders so difficult? We hear from project teams that these are some of the challenges that they face. Unfortunately, many teams end up contracting to an incorrect, overly detailed, or overly generalized BIM scope spreadsheet. These can be disastrous for the teams and for the project. Unfortunately, these scopes are generally mandated and not agreed. Usually, they're built by one person and mandated to other teams. Only viewed as a PDF or spreadsheet with a set of confusing numbers and usually inaccessible by others. Using a spreadsheet to define the who, what, when, and where becomes too complex and confusing for most. And unclear scope spreadsheets cause models that are missing scope, models with duplicate or overlapping scope, and are a huge waste of time. So let's talk about some tips about how to create a scope that teams can actually agree to. The key to unlocking most challenges is being able to ask the right questions. Here are some of those questions. Why are we doing BIM? What scope is required for that BIM use? How much is actually needed? When is the scope needed? Who is responsible? And where do we start? What are the most important BIM uses for the project? Why are teams creating 3D modeling in the first place? What is the purpose for BIM? Once you've got that, you need to know what scope needs to be managed on the project. What's the list of elements that will need to be estimated, coordinated, handed over? Then each BIM use teams must define how much BIM is actually required. How much BIM matters for each customer of the model at each stage of the project. Define the required geometry, documentation, and information requirements. Some of the most important parts are understanding and defining when critical handovers of responsibility occur, like here for the stairs from the architect to the structural team. Knowing who is responsible and when is critical for project success. What's needed for the perfect BIM scope? Answers to these questions reveal what's important, when it's required, for what BIM use or purpose, who's responsible, and what handovers are expected or agreed to. So a quick recap. Always start with a purpose. Why are we creating a model in the first place? What scope is required? How much is actually needed? when is the scope needed, and who is responsible. We see a lot of teams responding well to a visual grid, not just the information or the accuracy or the geometry. It's a combination of all those, so we define what is required by whom and then be able to assign them. That helps us see the handover from one team to another. And very importantly, as we just mentioned, we are making it a lean workflow. So everyone understands what the requirements are and is able to deliver. Once we have that clear scope, how would we go about sequencing those tasks? It's all about making sure tasks get completed at the right time in the right way. It's all about the why. Well, if we get them in the wrong order, even if we were to avoid a clash, it still could lose us money. On the left-hand side, the pipes don't run through the cable tray, but it will cost more in materials and time. There is more bends and welds and supports. But if we get the sequence right, we get the plumbing installed before the cable tray and avoid losing time and money. How do we prioritize tasks to minimize the impact on cost? Sequencing the less expensive element to route around the other will reduce the cost. But why is sequencing BIM tasks such a challenge? Some teams report these challenges. Since we can't all be in the same office and it's difficult to influence other people's work, we can end up with out of sequence work, which leads to rework due to having to move something because it didn't work out. Using lean design management concepts are starting to become more common, but for most, this is actually a completely new concept. So let's talk about some tips on how to sequence the tasks in a more optimal order. The first key, and it's a big picture idea, that if we can have a system priority structure setting the foundation, the more important or the less flexible items first, then going on to the more flexible or less costly things to work on. That would be really beneficial. And also implementing a lean design management workflow and pool planning and phase planning so we can really sequence the tasks effectively. This can help to ensure that everyone is contributing to the plan and agreeing to the most optimum sequence. We can start to capture those critical dependencies and assign tasks digitally to team members so that the assignments carry forward for when they are not in the office. The result is that we can have a plan to start each team at the right time, even if that means in vastly different project stages or phases, so that we avoid unnecessary waste and rework. This means we are not wasting people's time. They are adding to the model at the right time and in the right place. We are reducing the amount of rework on the project. This directly impacts the project cost. And for a quick recap, we are enhancing teamwork. Collaboration is the very key. All of us need to agree on the system priority structure. Everyone involved needs to be present for the pool planning. And ultimately, this reduces all the amount of work. It makes managing and completing schedules lean and straightforward. So let's look at how we actually manage the tasks. So this is a cartoon from Dilbert. So you're asking for a status report on the status report of the status report. Why is updating project progress such a challenge for teams? Everyone tends to create and manage their own to-do list in their own isolated environment. It's usually up to one person to gather everyone's updates. And even when you do receive that information, can you trust it? Let's look at some tips for simple and seamless progress updates that teams can trust. We've seen the best results when teams use simple Kanban boards. It's a column-based chart that you can drag and drop cards to quickly understand their status. You can have lots of different columns to represent those. What is prioritized? What is ready for review? The actual power comes from consolidating all team members' tasks in a single location. But it's not just a Kanban board. It's about doing everything in one place, one location. This means that everyone is tracking the progress together, not their individual silos. On the left-hand side of the screen, we see Michelle's tasks that are simply filtered, and that makes it really easy for her to just drag and drop her updates. And on the right-hand side, we see Ted. He sees the overview of all the tasks, making it a lot easier to understand the progress. Then it's important to make sure that the updates are a team effort. Instead of it being one person being responsible for going around and collating the reports, each team member can filter their own tasks to make updates. Then managers can see all tasks to understand the big picture. Now, a quick recap. One to-do list can help all the team members collaborate in sequence and effectively communicate when tasks and content will be completed. Kanban boards help visualize this process and keep everything all in one place. It's then imperative to ensure that teams are meeting those requirements. So let's take a look at how teams can verify that these objectives have been met. Why verify BIM compliance? Well, if there is one bad apple or model, then it can cause a significant impact on all of the other models, cause a lot of problems for everyone else in terms of clashes, and missed content can really affect the whole status of the project. We want to keep it all on track, so it's really important to make sure you have compliance. If you have missed content, trying to coordinate around it is virtually impossible. Think about the impact of missing content on the quantities of an estimate. Why is this a challenge? Why is verifying against those requirements sometimes a big challenge? A lot of the time, unfortunately, the original requirements are unclear. Is it a 6 or is it a 9? We use disconnected tools which make it difficult to bring that data together to connect the requirements to the deliverables. Also, understanding contracts and how risk is usually allocated in our design and construction industry really does not help. It's a big challenge when someone is not on the hook for something that is part of their requirements from a BIM perspective. So let's talk about a few tips on BIM compliance. The first important task is to prepare and consolidate your requirements. So one of those things might be to organize your requirements, whether they're by team member, status, milestones, whatever that may be. You just want to grab all that information, organize by team member, date, status, and milestone. You will want to organize your scope list, then consolidate your reference materials as attachment. Then gather your notes from pool planning sessions and kickoff meetings. Then list the requirements for each system or element. Again, tying back to the scope of requirements that you had initially planned. This could be information requirements and LOI requirements per stage. Having all these requirements in one place specifically ties to an element really helps you begin that verification process. Then, having all this in the same place makes it easier to review against the deliverables. We can review if those contracted tasks have been completed. The most important part of this whole workflow is getting to a deliverable that meets requirements and can be released. Only models that meet the original requirements can be published for the intended BIM use. Never publish a model that has not been verified. So as we turn this model from shared to published, we need to make sure that this has met those requirements. A quick recap. Let's consolidate all the requirements in one place. Let's make sure that we review every single model before it's released for anybody else. Let's make sure we can go through that QA list and make sure it's consolidated. Then we can make it a lot easier to review before we share and publish that model. In conclusion, to improve BIM management, we must make sure all teams are in agreement on the plan. Create a lean scope. A very lean scope can really help you accomplish your BIM execution plan. Sequencing and scheduling so that you're actually making sure that the sequence is lean and efficient and we're not creating more rework when we add things too early to the model. Also, as a team, managing the tracking and controlling, making sure that nothing is missed. So trying to consolidate tools and systems so that we can adhere to those requirements as we manage the process. And then verifying that model is ready for its BIM use, whether it's for cost estimation, coordination, or whatever, making sure that you really are confident in that model. Please join us for our next webinar in the series, episode 2, the introduction to BIM execution planning.